This is Groundeffected. My name is your dad, and this week's video is sponsored by Abe3D, but more about them later. Now this is Dejah Thoris. This is a warrior princess of some kind from the John Carter series. Apparently it's his wife. Now, as much of a nerd as I seem to be, I'm not actually that much of a nerd because I have absolutely no idea who this is. That's right. I've never watched John Carter. What is it, John Carter? That's fine though, because I don't actually need to have seen it, because Abe gives you absolutely stunning renders for you to follow. And as I'm sure you can already tell, this video is going to be another skin tone painting video. And as I paint this model, I'm hoping that I will impart upon you some of my knowledge about painting skins, whether they're realistic or not. It doesn't really matter, to be honest. I don't even know how I'm gonna approach this, but I have got to get it painted because it's a sponsored video. Now this model was printed on my GK3 Pro, and it has already been cleaned up, which is why it looks very dusty and a little bit dry at this point. But not to worry, because that dryness is going to be hidden by a lovely layer of primer. And I say it in every video, but I'll say it again, I'm going to use Chaos Black just because I can. Someone asked me this before, what do I use to hold the models on? And literally it's just ruined paintbrushes. Paintbrushes that did not last the test of time, and I just literally shove them in until they stick. I use thick or thin ones depending on the size of the holes, and that's the easiest way to hold them. And now that I have the primer on the model, it's going to be easy for me to start painting it. But before I paint it, I got a little bit distracted by making a little sticker for its base. Now the app I'm using on my iPad is called Procreate, and essentially all I did was took Abe's picture and a couple of other pictures and made a mix mash of a bunch of things there, so that I made a picture that could go on the bottom of the base and make it look a little bit better than just a holy base. So here is the print. It is printed on a piece of sticker paper. This is like a shiny piece of sticker paper, which I think is the correct term, is actually glossy. But anyway, I'm going to cut it out, but I'm not going to stick it on yet because I need to paint this first, because I'm going to be moving it around a load, so I don't want to be scratching it up before I've even got to putting it together. This video was sponsored by Abe3D. This is a Patreon over on the Patreon website, where for only $10 a month, you will receive a bunch of STL files for you to be able to print. These files are absolutely incredible and sculpted by some of the best artists amongst the sculpting world. And I'm not gonna lie, looking at what they have available just for December alone, we're looking at least 6 models. That's just the release for the month. There are also 4 additional models in the welcome pack, and these are rotated every single month. If you are interested in models just like the one that I'm painting in this video, then you might want to go check out the description for a link to Abe3D. Abe3D makes some incredible models, and I'm proud and happy to have let them sponsor this video. Please support the sponsors, because without them the lights can't blind my eyeballs. Let's carry on with painting the model. But for now, we can start setting up the skin tones that we're going to need to paint on this model later on. And to set that up, I'm going to paint a little bit of a white ink over the top of everything. In this time of painting, I am actually trying to force the light. This point is when I'm making sure that the light is where I want the light, and everything I need highlighted is now highlighted. After this, I'm going to leave this to dry so that I can quickly paint the sword. And I'm going to use this chrome paint from Green Stuff World and spray this all over the sword. And as you can see, it's super shiny. It's literally chrome in a bottle. But you need to leave this to dry and never touch it again. Maybe in a couple of weeks' time. Speaking of never touching things again, this is another paint that you don't want to be touching, and this is a gold chrome from Montana, and I'm going to spray that on the only thing that I can actually spray it onto, which is the tassels for the nips. Moving swiftly along, let's start painting the base. And on the base, I need to give it a little bit of a dry brushing of some colors. And the colors that I chose is a dark brown and then a lighter brown, so that they could stand off of each other. I then selected some other browns in the shape of slightly sandy kind of browns, and I'm going to use those to paint the sand that is apparently scattered around the base, which I think is supposed to be Mars sand. But I'm not really sure, to be totally honest. So what I did was I used a very small dry brush, and I just kind of brushed this over the texture that is on the base. I added a little bit of deck tan into that leather brown to try and bring it up a little bit and make it a bit brighter. And then I decided I needed to add some more color to it because it was just not the right color at the end of the day. So a little bit of Gilliman flesh over the top of everything adds a little bit more red to it, but also lost a little bit of my highlights. So I came back and dry brushed them back in again, and then came back in again with Reichland Flesh Shade, because apparently I was just not quite happy with the color of that sand, which you can see now by the fact that I decided spraying it is just no good anymore. I want way more of that red tone, so I just painted it on with a brush. Now, sticking the sticker on the bottom, I felt like adding a bit of super glue would help to keep it in place a little bit longer than just the sticky of the sticker paper. So I did that, and then also I sprayed it with a gloss clear coat to try and protect that little print as much as possible. Next steps is going to be putting down a little bit of bronze so that I can dry brush that on the circular disc that is above the base that I just painted. I'm then going to take some browns and start working on the pillow that is on the base. I'm not gonna lie, it looks just like a poo, but that is because I painted it brown, and maybe perhaps in hindsight brown was not the correct color for this, but the entire base in my mind needed to be as dull as possible because I wanted your attention to be on the lady that's standing on top of the base. So henceforth I didn't paint it very bright and colorful because I felt like that was the only way I could make you not look at her feet, because not that there was any other. Moving on, I used a little bit of deck tan to bring out some of the highlights on that doo-doo, and when I was done with that, I sprayed some washes over the top to get the tint in it that I wanted. I was not quite satisfied with the darkness of the shadows, so I used some Sagor brown and sprayed that into the shadows. Now, to move on to the skin tones, and of course, it's going to start out with a classic Pinkle layer over the top of that zenithal that I'd laid down. Now, this paint needs to be thinned down quite a bit, to be totally honest with you. I would honestly say maybe 50-50. The problem with thinning it down this much is that it can run, and it will most certainly run. If it speckles, don't worry about that. That's just going to add to the look of the skin tone. Now I'm going to paint, unfortunately, a red paint, because in this case I would rather be using a red ink, and this is why you can see I had thinned it down so much that you can see it in the background there, how thin it is, and it shows through whatever black is going to be underneath it, which is good, because I want to make sure that those shadows are not lost from the zenithal that I spent time making in the beginning. Now, just to reinforce that zenithal, I'm going to take some of the squid pink and paint it over the highlight areas. Again, hindsight is a very fantastic thing, and in the case of watching this back, I feel like I would probably make this a little bit smaller in space in the future, because I want that highlight to be so much more. I'm now going to use burned flesh, and I'm going to spray that over everything that I'd laid down before. This again is going to be a 50-50 mixture of water and paint, because you want this paint to be see-through. Then moving on to some brown rose, I'm going to spray that into the highlights much in the same way that I sprayed the zenithal. Everything at this point is spraying while the model is together, because at this point all I'm trying to do is get a tone for these skin tones, and this lady is supposed to be a Martian or something, so apparently she's supposed to have a slightly reddish tint to her skin, so I'm going to try to get that look when we get towards the end, and you'll see how I do that. I'm moving up with a brighter skin tone, and I'm going to spray that again just onto the highlights, then taking a slightly warmer skin tone and spraying that 50-50 with water again. When you're painting skin tones like this, the trick honestly is to just add water and do a couple of layers, because what you want to do is build up the highlights. Now I decided that I wanted to add a bit more brightness into the skin tone, and I'm going to use Sunny Skin Tone, which is a color that has quite a bit of yellow in it. Essentially, the skins have many colors, but yellow is one of those colors that kind of stands out, at least to me as an artist, as one of the main skin colors that you need to essentially push forward for your eye to believe that these things have depth. I'm going to then seal everything in with a matte varnish, and there is no specific reason for using the one that I used other than the fact that it was the last one left in my shop and I used it. Now I'm going to move on to painting the base, and with the base it's basically the same thing as the other bases. That is saying the word base way too many times, so I'm just going to sit back and let you watch me dry brush this base. I said it again. Once I was satisfied that the cushion sufficiently looked like a cushion, I then went back in with some washes and started adding some depth to this cushion. Spraying it in between all the little crevasses is a very good way of adding some depth. I also used some dark washes into the background just to really force the perspective of depth as well. I then took some Sagor brown and painted that onto the little buttons in between each little piece of the fluffy, I don't know, there's a word for this thing and I don't know what that word is. If you leave it in the comments down below, I probably won't reply to you about it because there will be more than one comment. However, I can't remember the word, so if you don't know what it is, look at the comments, someone will tell you. Quickly, before I get lost here, as you can see, I've turned the pressure of my airbrush as low as possible, and at this point it makes that Reikland flesh shade a little bit spitty out of my airbrush. This is the one time you want your airbrush spitting, and that is to add freckles all over everything. They are going to stand out though, so that's why I did that before I did the Orcish dermis layers, and that is the color that we're going to use to bring the pink back into the model, and this is going to go into all the bendy parts and mostly in the shadows. It's going to help cover up some of that black that might be left over, but most importantly it's going to add that color back into the model. Now I'm going to go back to those colors that I used to create the skin tones at first, and I'm going to start building them back up. This time this paint is extremely thin. I would say on the edge of being 40% paint and 60% water, and this is because I'm going to build these layers up now over the top of those freckles that I laid down, because I don't want to actually cover them, but I do want it to seem like they are actually underneath the surface of the skin. For the hair, what I used was Sagor brown, and I sprayed this pretty loosely over the top of the hair. I then took a grey, which is a neutral grey, and I kind of dry brushed that onto all the highlighted areas of the hair, helping to bring out some of these strands. If you leave it like this, it's going to look way too weird, so I'm coming back in with this grey, and I'm going to spray that over the top of everything, and this is going to help to sort of disguise some of that dry brush that was a little bit too harsh in the first place. And now I'm going to use some black into the shadows, and I'm going to try to get those shadows a little bit deeper looking. However, it's not going to work out the way that I actually expected, so I'm going to move on quickly to the rest and last part of painting the skin tones, and this is going to be adding the highlights to the actual skin tone itself. And I'm going to use a little bit of white with my brightest skin tone, and I'm going to spray this in the specular parts of the highlights. This is all the areas that the absolute brightest of lights would hit. Now, coming back to that yellow that I spoke about in the skin before, I wanted to add a little bit more of that yellow back, and as you can see, I added a couple of drops of yellow into my airbrush, and I put a whole load of water. At this point, it's about 5% paint and 95% water, and I sprayed that over everything. This is just to tint the surface. I'm now going to take some Reikland flesh shade, and I'm going to shade that into the shadows of her body. This is going to help bring out some of that redness that I need to make her skin look a little bit redder, to match the whole Martian thing, I think. Now to start working on my favorite thing, and that is an absolute lie because I do not like painting gold, but however, there is a lot of gold on this lady, and to paint this gold, I'm going to set it up with Monument Hobbies bronze, and after I've done that, I will come back and paint it with that Montana paint, and I'll show you how I do that in just a little bit. Taking the spray paint can and a leftover cap from another spray paint can that may have perhaps been thrown away, and spraying that paint into that cap is the only way to get this paint out. At least that's what I know, and that's how it is right now. So I spray a load of that into a cap, and this is the paint I'm going to use. Now this paint absolutely ruins your brush, and the only way I can get it off of my brush is by using a thinner, no water and no alcohol. I take that paint very carefully and paint that over everything that I had originally painted with the bronze. Now for that tiny little piece of fabric that is in the front and back covering the important bits, I'm going to use some Sagor brown and I'm going to paint that over everything. And because this paint is slightly translucent, it's going to have some high spots and low spots according to what the shades look like of the skin tones that were underneath this color when I laid it down. The next step is to obviously paint the rest of the bronze that is on the bottom part of the suit. And as you can see, I have painted it this way because this made it easier for me to just kind of haphazardly paint that little piece of fabric and not really worry too much about if I was going to ruin my gold. And then I'm going to get back to painting gold onto everything else that I had painted bronze onto previously. Now the only part of this entire project that I'm actually not happy with is the gems, and this is because I just chose the wrong colors. I'm an actual idiot and there was nothing we can do about it because it's already been done, and I'm pretty sure we know by now that I work on a very tight time constraints. I used a medium kind of purple, which is like a pretty purple, and then I painted ROXY violet over the top of them, hoping that this would somehow save the fact that I actually needed to go in and paint the edges of each gem with a little bit of white, just to make them look like gems. However, I'm just going to move on and I'm going to paint the handle of her sword, which is I think called the hilt, with black, because it is black. And then I'm going to use that bronze to do the little edging of the little rings that are around the hilt. And when that's done, I'm going to take a little bit of burnt cadmium red and I'm going to paint that just around that tiny little piece where the sword goes into the words. Yes, those are the correct words. I'm then going to attach the sword onto the back of the sword. Oh my god. Anyway, painting her hair was pretty much the same way as painting the rest of the other gold bits. I painted them bronze at first, and then I came back with the worst color for gems and painted the gems. I also, at this point, before I put that bright gold on top of everything, I used a little bit of a panel line wash to just go over and add a little bit more black into the recessed parts of the hair. And then I added that gold over the top of it and put it aside to dry. I'm now going to work on the face of this model, and I'm going to start out by adding Magos purple onto her lips. I was not happy with this, mainly because her lips are actually red because she has lipstick on. So I moved over to using a red, and this Tamir red has a shiny glossy effect once it's painted, so I decided this made the most sense since it was a see-through red and also has a shine to it. It saved me having to put a gloss on at the end. I then painted the caterpillars above her eyes with a lot of little tiny brush strokes and using Sagor brown. And the reason that I use lots of tiny brush strokes is because this helps to give the effect that there are tiny little hairs, even if there isn't. I'm then going to take model color black from Vallejo and I'm going to thin this down and paint that over her eyelashes on her eyes. If you are adding a bottom line of eyeliner, this is the time to add that now. I'm then going to take some Griff Charger Grey and put that into my airbrush on a very low air pressure, and I'm going to spray that extremely carefully onto the top part of her eyelid and just to the slightly outside of her eyes to create the illusion of makeup, because I actually don't know what makeup's meant to look like, so I'm just going to fake it until we make it. I'm also going to take a little bit of this very bright fluorescent magenta and spray that super thin down onto her cheeks just to, again, makeup, fake it, whatevs. Moving on to her eyes, I am going to paint squid pink into her eyes first. This is going to go everywhere, and this is a little piece that I'm going to leave behind when I'll do the sclera. Words are really hard today, I'm not even going to lie, but when I come back later with the whites of the eyes, which I'm going to use highlight skin for, I'm going to use that pink before to stay behind as a thin little outline around the bottom part of the eye, not the top, because the eyelid on the top comes down and you don't really see that pinkness of the eye. So this is just to simulate the pinkness of the eye. I'm not painting realistic, so if you wanted to paint it realistic, there would be a totally different process for this, but moving on. To paint the irises is fairly straightforward. You want to try to aim to keep these in the center of the eye, but not too close to each other, because then she'll look squint. I use Cygor Brown to set this up, and once that Cygor Brown is in the right place and I'm happy with it, I'm going to use a little bit of Leather Brown to lighten it up. With the irises, you want the top portion of the iris to be covered slightly and the bottom portion to be sticking out completely round. Not always, but in most cases completely round. This is an alert looking eye and not a sleepy looking eye. So after you've gotten happy with the fact that your iris is in the right place and she doesn't look squint, you're going to take a little bit of black and put that in the center of it, taking a little bit of white after that to add a specular highlight. This is the highlight that the light makes from reflecting off of the freaking shininess that is inside of your eyeballs. Once they are in the right place, you can use a little bit of gloss varnish to make sure that the eyes actually do in fact look wet, and then when they're looking sufficiently wet, you can stick the hair onto the model, put it together and call it done. I hope that this video gave you even just a slight more insight into painting skin tones and 3D models as a whole. Hopefully, if you were using this video to pass the time on the toilet, you will wash your hands before you carry on with the rest of your day. And if not, well, I feel sorry for whoever you shake hands with. Now, it is time for you to use those dirty hands to click the like button on this video, because that tells YouTube that you actually like this video, and that helps the algorithm to send videos to more people. I don't know, something about just make me popular, please. I want to be popular. I need some more subscribers, because for every subscriber I get, I will have one more new subscriber. I want to say a special thank you for watching my video, but an even more special thank you to my patrons who help support this channel from the background. Those people are on the screen right now. Also, if you are interested in the model, please check out the description so you can check out the sponsor of this video. And if you didn't like anything that you saw in the video, of course I really don't care. And it is now time for you to fuck off. You can have this model if you would like this model. I am putting this model up for raffle, and it is going on my raffle page, whatever you want to call the thing. Anyway, if you want to get this model, there is only one available. I've only painted this one. Abe gave me permission to sell it, and so I am putting it up for raffle in order to raise funds for my studio. Of course, we can always use more funds in the studio. So if you want to win this model, then go check out the description for a link to the raffle for this model.